On a midweek morning in September 1943, 11-year-old John Wesson left his home on Oswin Avenue and began the short journey to the school on the opposite side of the road. As he reached the edge of the pavement, John had to decide which direction he would take to avoid the air raid shelter which blocked his route to the school gates. If John turned right, he would be greeted by the sight of the Land Army barracks situated on the field 100 yards from his home. If John turned left, he would face the Woodfield estate, located half a mile away, where only months before devastation was wrought by the Luftwaffe. Whichever way he turned, John would be surrounded by reminders of a world in conflict. John Wesson was just one of hundreds who passed through the Oswin Avenue school gates, who were witnesses to war. With the policy of appeasement failing to halt Nazi Germany's expansionism in Europe, head teacher James Payne Mason could have been forgiven for contemplating that he may soon be leading the Oswin Avenue school through another war. In his essay, written in evening class, former Oswin pupil Cyril Holmes provides a clue as to how potential for war was occupying minds during that period. On September the 3rd, 1939, the potential became a reality.
This morning, the British ambassador in Berlin handed the German government a final note stating that unless we heard from them by 11 o'clock, that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany.
I have a very clear recollection of listening to the wireless. We heard the Prime Minister announce we are now at war with Germany. War seemed so very far away that summer morning, and to me nothing seemed to have changed. It did very quickly though. Rationing of food, the blackout, an Anderson shelter in the back garden, gas masks which had to be taken everywhere and at all times. We couldn't attend school until the air raid shelters were built.
Second World War started. We lost a lot of time because of doing drills of how fast we could get from the school into these air raid shelters.
We used to have air raid practices at the time, where we used to go out into the two shelters that were just to the left of the main gate, boys' entrance. And we got in there and we had to put our masks on and stayed there for probably 20 minutes and then back into school. And luckily for us, we never actually had to use them when there was an air raid, because all the air raids seemed to happen at night.
When the war was getting a bit stronger, I had to carry a gas mask, and it was just a wooden little cardboard box. We had to put it over our shoulder and walk off to school with it on our shoulders, and take it into class. And every so often a bell would go, and we had to march out in a file and out into the playground and have the test with the gas mask. We had to put it on over your head, on your face, and it didn't look very nice and it didn't taste very nice either. We all did it and we all got used to it. We never had to go without it, and we had to remember to pick it up to take it home.
In addition to those built in public settings, air raid shelters were also to become a feature of many domestic dwellings.
And of course we had a little Anderson shelter down the bottom of the garden, and I do remember going in that, and we did keep it after the war to put the bikes in. But it was so tiny, I don't think we all went in, because I know my mother had a job getting my other brothers out of bed, because you could hear the sirens going. But no, we're not getting up. But I remember going in it. Smelt damp and that,
And at home, an air raid shelter between two of you, So we used to go next door, and it was fitted out with 2 benches at either side, and there was some kind of heating. I wouldn't like to say what it was, but we were never cold. And I mean, we went down there sometimes in the middle of the night. There was 2-3 steps down.
When we came home from school, we used to see all the balloons up from Sheffield, you know, to stop the aircraft coming over. We used to wait for balloons coming up. They weren't there all the time, only when they thought there were going to be an air raid or whatever. But we used to see how many we could count on my own from school.
We had a shelter in our garden. Anderson did the column where you went down into it, like, you know. We had one of them in our back garden. But my grandma, they lived in Nicholson Road, and they had a table, and they had steel all the way around this square thing. They used to get under the table there. Yeah, that was their shelter.
We never went into the shelter. We went into the coal out, into the pantry, underneath the pantry shelf. My mum, my 2 brothers, the dog, and the canary. We sat there until my mum thought it was quite safe to come out.
London often bore the brunt of the air raids, experiencing 57 consecutive days of bombing from the 7th of September 1940.
The evacuation of British children is going on smoothly and efficiently. The Ministry of Health says that great progress has been made with the first part of the government's arrangements. Railways, the road transport organisations, the local authorities and teachers, the voluntary workers, and not least the householders in the reception areas are all playing their parts splendidly.
Whilst many children were evacuated to the relative safety of the countryside, one couple chose an alternative place of refuge for their children.
I was born in Bermondsey, 200 yards from Tower Bridge. And at the bottom of our street were all the food wharves. It was the main port, but all ships used to come in, bringing food and that. When war broke out and they started evacuating, we were one of the first, because they said the Tower Bridge and wharves first to get shut it, because it would remain docking for all ships coming in bringing food, etc. And all pregnant women had got to go as well. Father said, there's no way my kids is going anywhere. You know, I'll sort them. So I was taken to an aunt's in Bentley at Doncaster. My sister, younger sister, was taken to his other sisters at Hucknall. Oh, terrible. Hated it. Put on a train at King's Cross. Somebody met me at the other end. And I started my school days at Bentley School. And I hated it because I was a foreigner. They didn't understand me and I didn't understand them.
Albert Frost's family had moved to London just a few months before the Blitz began.
In Chelsea, where you got King's Road at one end of Uvedale Road, and the other end you've got the Locks Road Power Station. 500 yards from there was Battersea Power Station, and that's when the German planes were coming over trying to bomb the power stations, and half of our street did actually get hit. And I remember all the windows where we lived in Chelsea, all the windows went in, and you could actually see the walls bending with the force of the, the bombs, explosions. Mum and Dad decided we'll go back to Doncaster, just in case, because it was a near miss, really. It was a near miss.
Whilst Doncaster was spared the levels of devastation experienced by some other cities, it remained a target for bombing, and Doncaster lives were lost. Between December 1940 and September 1942, bombs fell on several parts of the town, including Exthorpe, Bentley, Bessica and Station Road.
They tried to get Benberg's factory because Benberg's on Weekly Hall Road made all the silk for parachutes. They tried to get Doncaster Plant Works and Loco, but they missed. There were some shops on the right opposite Doncaster station, and a bomb fell flat on there, and that's where we used to get our pens and ink for school. It completely destroyed them, and it also damaged the theatre, the Grand Theatre. It cracked all the walls and did damage to it. We used to sit in our garden and watch German bombers go across to bomb Rotherham and Sheffield, and we could see the glow in the sky of Rotherham and Sheffield burning.
Which is only about 16 miles away. So we used to sit and wait for them coming over to drop the bombs, and we never knew where they were going to land. We always thought it were going to land on you, but luckily they didn't. But they fell on some poor soul all over Sheffield, which was bombed down.
A bomb came at the bottom of Eden Grove, and we went down to see the crater where it was. It was right where my father's, because that's what they were after. They were after the railway works, and the bomb dropped there right at the bottom of the street, but it didn't go off. They come and took whatever they did with it. I don't know what they did with it, but the crater was there where it had been.
On the 8th of May 1941, the Woodfield estate in Borby suffered the town's largest loss of life in a single assault, when 2 aerial mines descended, exploding with catastrophic consequences.
One night came over and dropped a landmine which comes down by parachute. Some of them were delayed, but some of them exploded when they hit the ground, and some were timed to explode so many feet above the ground. And there was a cycle shop on Borby Road called Upperdines, which had glass windows, and I remember that would have been about half a mile or so away from where the landmine came down. It blew all the windows out, you know.
This particular night, when the sirens went, we came downstairs, and before we got into the shelter, we was in what we call the living room. We had French windows. Of course, the blinds were drawn, because if there was any chink of light showing anywhere, sure enough there'd be an air raid warden that would be telling you to get the curtains drawn. Anyway, I remember I was stood holding the living room door open, and then all of a sudden there was this almighty blast, and it blew the French windows in and blew the door out of my hand, blew it shut. We couldn't get into the air raid shelters quick enough.
Knew that there had been a bomb drop nearby, which happened to be at Woodfield area, and the blast was such that the shop next door, which was Case's, the hairdressers, the front window had blown out, curtain had gone out with it, and then the glass had come back in and trapped the glass part in, part out. So we knew that it was a huge blast that had gone off and caused that to happen. Didn't break the window. We just carried on, trimmed up the curtains so they looked more presentable, and off we went.
The kids had been playing out in the garden, and they'd left a tea set on the window ledge, and some of the windows got blown out, but that tea set never got broken. Yeah, little tea set, and it was pot one.
We got ready for school the same day as normal, and we went to school. When we arrived there, all of the glass, because there were not just the windows in the outside of the school was blown in, but also there was like a conservatory that ran all the way around the school, enclosing the rectangle in the middle. and all that glass was blown in. And also there were some houses near to Woodfield School where this landmine had either landed or exploded, and they were devastated. I know a pupil that was in my class, he died in the explosion, which was upsetting at the time, obviously.
16 people were killed and 73 injured by the blast. Amongst the fatalities were former Oswin Avenue pupils, brothers Alfred and Arthur Northrop. 7-year-old Margaret Wagstaff, who a few years later would attend Oswin Avenue School, miraculously survived. One newspaper reported how the chair on which she was sat had been overturned by a blast, sheltering her from falling rubble. Whilst family members grieved for those lost, some children took the opportunity for adventure amongst the ruins.
We being young, me and Ray Oldham, we went scattering and digging through the rubble of the houses. Now we didn't know at this particular time, but we were acting dangerous because there was also a bomb called incendiary bomb. And these were about 2 foot long, be about 4 or 5 inches diameter, and as such, they could explode at any time. But we went digging in there, and I came out, and my first choice from there was a pram with 3 wheels and a doll with no head. And I got mocked because I picked these up and brought them home. But
one night a bomb did go off, and it wasn't not far away. It was just up the top of the street and past the shop over the other side of the main road. Part of the bits and some of the pieces fell about 3 doors up from where we were into a lady's garden called Mrs. Booth. Of course, everybody next day were going, finding bits and pieces that had fallen off.
In June 1944, the first V1 attacks on Britain occurred. These doodlebugs, as they came to be known, were pilotless jet-propelled missiles. Possessing great destructive capacity, they were designed to strike fear into the hearts of the people.
They mostly came in from the German-occupied Channel Coast, aiming at London. But when that failed, the Germans adapted their bombers, Eichel 111, to carry a couple of these flying bombs, and they would fly to Hull and then aim them in a direct line. If they came down early, they'd either hit Sheffield or go on to hit Manchester or Liverpool.
they used to make a noise like drrrr, and they went across and had flames coming out at back.
There are 1 fighter, 2 fighters, 3 fighters after him.
You were all right while you saw the flame. Once that flame went out, it was coming down.
Doncaster played an important role in wartime manufacturing. With many men serving in the armed forces, women entered the factories, often taking on roles which had previously been considered the preserve of males. Amongst their number was Nellie Stagles, who combined the running of a dance studio with employment in the plant works drawing office.
Although it was arduous work there, I enjoyed it. There were lots of nice young men, and as I was one of the very few young women there, they used to bring me flowers and strawberries. Whenever I walked through the main works, they all wolf whistled at me.
I was 14, I left school, and I went to work down in Briggs aircraft factory. So I worked there. Not long after Alan came, and he got a job there as well, until he left and went to the Navy. But I stayed there for quite a while, until I was 16 or 17 or something. But you used to have to walk a long way, walk up miles up the lane, and there was Italian prisoners of war all up on one side in the fields, you know, and that we had to. I was only 15 then, and we had to walk because we weren't old enough for a bus to come down for the younger workers. They used to come down at 6 o'clock for the older workers. But with those leaving at 5, we had to walk, and it was a long walk. But we used to do it.
When I left school, I went to Bruce Motor Bodies, which was a shadow aircraft factory, and we worked on the side panels for Lancaster engines. On this section, most of the workers were women, and they worked damn hard. They were good. Young women there were, and married women. If you were a certain age, you had to work. And I got put, that first morning, with, they called her Shirley. She came from Edlington. She'd be 16, and an older woman, about the same age as my mother, I guess. And because my job, you put a sheet of this aluminium on a jig, and then you put, it was like an anti-drum thick paint. It was like glue they used to have, kept heated up, you know. It could scald you. My job was to get this and paint it on roughly where they were going. Then the frame of the jig went over, then they dropped these, what they call stiffener panels, on top. They would drill pilot holes in, 1/8 of an inch, size 30 really, and just put some of these rivets in, and then put it to one side, ready for going on a machine, which later on you did 500 rivets in about 5 minutes. You'll think of that. The record was 4.5. Because I was too slow, this Shirley dabbed it on my hand. And I was just about, I went, you, and she said, naughty, naughty.
Working in critical industries such as coal and rail meant that many Doncaster-based workers fulfilled roles which were considered essential to the war effort. At the outbreak of war, former Oswin Avenue pupil and promising amateur boxer Bruce Woodcock was one of those employed in Doncaster's rail industry whose work was given reserved occupation status. In the early 1940s, Bruce was redeployed to Manchester, where he worked as a maintenance engineer in a shell-making plant. Whilst in Manchester, he began what was to become a legendary professional boxing career. While people worked hard to maintain wartime production, they also found ways to relax, including through music and dance.
But then we were always dancing. When they came home on leave, I used to see Bill, not so much Alan, but Bill used to be at the same dance hall as I was, and you know, you don't feel safe. You know, you've got your brother there, and because it was to go on for a bit late at night when big bands came. Really enjoyed it. So, and the Americans were there in the war. There were a lot of Americans. Of course, they were always at the dance hall. So we used to get a lot of dancing done. And one night, Joe Loss came and he was playing. They were playing there. So it was really, really entertaining, and really enjoyed it. So that was a good part of the war, you know.
Throughout the war, key components in civil defence were the civilian volunteer organisations. Margaret Dingle combined her duties as the Oswin Avenue Girls' Headmistress with those of an ARP ambulance driver.
Towards the end of the war, my father was an ARP warden, and we had a passageway in our house to get to the back of the house, or for 2 houses, and we had a ladder in there that my father looked after to help people if the houses got bombed or damaged in fires or anything, for them to help get people out of the houses. People donated to pay for that ladder, but my father looked after it.
And my dad was ARP man for the street. We had in our front room, we had a man had made it specially first aid cabinet. It was a big one like that. It had all drawers in with everything, and that was kept in our front room. And the ladders, when you got halfway down the street, because there were terraced houses, but you got halfway down, there was a little ginnel you went down, and then there was a few more houses after it, and there was 2 hooks, and these ladders were kept in on that hook, and they were for if you needed to, to get there. Yeah.
I was a scholar at Oswin Avenue School. I left school at the age of 14, 1939. That was the year war broke out. 2 years later, I joined the Civil Defence Force as a messenger. Now, the messengers were added to the ARP force as in case communications broke down due to bombing. And our duty was, when the siren went, we had to go with our bicycles to various ARP posts. One of them was in Waverley, Balby, in the Bullring there. I think that was K2. The other one was in Cedar Road, just beyond there, and that was a builder's yard, and we used their office, and that would be K3. And they were just sparsely furnished, a kettle, a couple of mugs, telephone, and of course a grizzled ARP warden. We didn't have any problems, but we had to go when the sirens went.
During the Second World War period, the government implemented various measures to boost food production. The Dig for Victory campaign encouraged people to grow food in gardens and on allotments. The Women's Land Army played a crucial role in compensating for the shortage of farm labourers. They were often joined in the fields by school children.
In fact, they had a big campaign, Dig for Victory. But my father, he had an allotment down Springwell Lane, and as a consequence, a lot of our food was homegrown, which everybody was encouraged to do at the time.
During the war, there was a Land Army hostel just down the lane from the school on the way to Exthorpe Flats. Quite a few Land Army girls in there. One night, there was a knock on our door, and there was this Land Army girl there. Mother answered the door, and she asked if there was anyone who could escort it down the lane, because it was a dark night. And apparently, one of the girls had been attacked a few nights before. My mother and I escorted her down. She invited us in, and we had a cup of tea with all the girls. After that, it seemed to become a regular thing. At the weekends, on Sundays, we sat there and knock on the door, and girls would be there asking for escort down. It became a regular thing at weekend. My father was in one day, and he had me and him escorted them down. One Christmas, some of the girls were left behind, but they didn't all go home. Some lived too far, I think. So Mother invited, there were 6 of them, for Christmas lunch. So we put them round our table. They enjoyed it that much, that thing. A few months later, they were having a birthday party for one of the girls in the hostel, and they came and invited all our family. So we all went down, and we enjoyed it. And then the girls at Christmas asked me if I went, and my mates went carol singing. I said, yeah, we do. So she said, well, can you come and sing carols for us? So 6 of us went down and sang carols for them. Good, because all the girls made a fuss of it.
Obviously by the 3rd year, probably the 2nd. We used to watch them, walk along, and one of the girls lives near Oswin Avenue, had been to the school, and she recognised her in a uniform, because the arts department looked out over the where they were building the huts for the Land Army girls.
I always wore Wellingtons, and girls always used to put string round the bottom of the legs, so rats, mice wouldn't run up the legs. Anyway, we got started at top of this big stack. Because we used to chuck sheaves across to each other. There were sheaves then, and then somebody'd load the thrasher. Anyway, there's a chap come, and one of the girls says to him, "Tie your leg, get some string round your trousers." I says, "I will do when we get towards bottom of stack." She says, "That's still come to top of stack." She says, "They still wet the way up." She says, "You'll get some." No, he don't going to do that. No. Next thing, he's shouting and squealing. He's got a rat up his trousers. And they kept saying, like girls kept saying, "Take your trousers down, take your trousers down." Well, he won't take his trousers down, he just jumped off stack. And he set across field. And of course, Penny and Spider, two little dogs we got, were after him. Well, and then a couple of land girls went after him and all. Anyway, he's jumping about, and of course dogs by then around his legs, aren't they? They're after rat, because they could smell him. So he fell down, and these two land girls trying to undo his belt on his trousers. Two dogs jumping in among them after rat. Oh, it was a scream. And of course, they finally pulled his trousers down and rat popped out, but he didn't get far. Dogs got it.
In an attempt to ensure food production, prisoners of war were also employed on farms to address the labour shortage.
I remember working on Beestall's farm, going down for picking potatoes, spud bashing, when they, at that stage of the war, it was 43 I guess, when Italy no longer took the part of the Germans, and so he used Italian prisoner of war to work on the farm. And they had the plum jobs. They didn't work. I remember then, I can remember three of them, and the farmer, because I knew him, I'd visit, because my friend, same age as me, John Beestall, went down to meet his uncle. I knew him, but he didn't recognise me. And all they were doing was singing Italian songs, and it didn't work. The nearest they came to working was because not many farmers had tractors. You had a horse as big as a shy horse pulling a cart, and they would drive that behind you, and they had wicker baskets where they'd been over with a plough and unearthed most of the potatoes, but you got to scratch around. And what they did, there were rows of you doing that, and the slowest, they would drive the horse behind you to speed you up. And the other thing was, when you'd filled your wicker basket with potatoes, they picked it up and threw it over, and they'd try and throw it out your head and all that.
Us being at school, there were shorter people on the land, so we used to get what we called breaks in our schooling, where we used to go out onto the land and pick potatoes, peas, anything that wanted picking. And also the fact is, the prisoners of war off of the Doncaster prisoner of war camp, they also came out in lorries. Anyway, the thing is, we got very friendly with these prisoners of war, and one of them made me a model of a warship. It was an Italian warship. We used to really have a nice talk to them. There were 3 prisoners. There was Italian, very friendly. There was Germans, very friendly. But if you got one that had been a member of the Nazi Party, stay away. You were not welcome at all.
There were no guards with them or anything, and it worked together, and they were really good hard-working men, as I remember.
The heroic efforts of the workforce did not negate the need for rationing to be introduced. In 1940, Every person in the United Kingdom was issued with a ration book containing coupons.
It was a good time because everybody, as I said, was in the same boat. Rationing was brilliant. They learned from the First World War. And you could get your stamps, and if you took some sugar and what have you down into town, you get some sweets back at the market.
I had a visitor one day who brought a big box full of Horlicks tablets, and they were in a little tube like you'd get now with lozenges in, and we were all handed out a tube of these Horlicks tablets, which we all devoured straight away because we were all so hungry.
Because we still had ration books when I started at the health food stores. Yes, there were still certain things was rationed. Yeah, and you used to find that some families they'd have so many ration books with one shop and so many ration books with another shop, so that they would get any extras if there was any claim on. And I always remember we had at top of Eden Grove there was a corner shop, and I remember once going in to fetch something because you didn't go and buy a whole week's worth of shopping like you do now. You used to go for everything as you wanted it. And the shop was on the corner, and we were the first house down the street. So our house was next to the shop's garage. And I went in for something one day, and Mr. Davis he called him Davis as well. He come to where I was stood, and whispered to me, "Go home and tell your mum if you bring the green ration book, you can have some oranges." Yeah. So and diabetics, they had different amounts of food. I think they got more cheese and things like that. Or vegetarians got different amounts of stuff. Yeah. Well, it was very, very different.
Following military setbacks during the early months of the war, with Britain's regular army weakened and stretched thin, a new force, the local Defence Volunteers, was formed. Later to be renamed the Home Guard, this militia composed of volunteers, both old and young.
Well, in 1940, when I was 10 years old, because my friend's bigger brother joined the Home Guard, actually. They were looking for people to come and join, and even though I was only 10 years old, me and my friend went along and called him Albert Jarvis. We went down to the old buildings on the racecourse, and we were treated as if we were adults. We did all the square bashing there, and subsequently, when I actually went into the army in 1948, it was easy for me, because I'd done it all. And then what we used to do was meet every Sunday at Oswin Avenue School, because that was B Company's headquarters of Home Guard. They would go out most Sundays on round Exthorpe towards Sprotborough doing manoeuvres. I and my friend Albert, we were runners, messenger boys between the different platoons. So we were crawling about through the undergrowth, which was good fun at that age. I think it must have been about once a month we used to have a parade along outside Oswin Avenue. And as we walked along, we didn't have a band, but in the war, anybody marching along attracted people in the houses coming out. And so everybody along Oswin Avenue were coming out and watching us. The Home Guard, first of all, weren't enough rifles, and they got issued with wooden ones. Then when these rifles came over from Canada, I believe, they were laughed at as the people who came out to look at it and said, why should Britain tremble, which was a bit embarrassing.
I have felt for some time a great desire that a tribute should be paid throughout Great Britain and in Ulster, to the faithful, unwearying, and absolutely indispensable work done by the Home Guard month after month and year after year. Accordingly, next Sunday, military parades and religious services will be held throughout the land to associate the nation and the Home Guard in the celebration of its first 3 years of life.
Also, I taught unhung in the main hall at Osborne Avenue. I was taught on unarmed combat with a big sergeant. I can remember we were in a circle. He picked on me and he said, "Come to me," as if he got a rifle and bayonet. I didn't have. I went along like this, and he got hold of me and showed what would have happened. I'd have had a rifle and bayonet, knocking that to one side, and sent me flying over and were kneeling. I was very close to tears. I also remember going on Exthorpe Flats near the Dell, and there used to be children's amusement, swings and things like that. But in the war, that was used by soldiers and the Home Guard as a place to practice throwing hand grenades. These hand grenades weren't armed, they were painted white, and it was a case of going through the drill or pulling the pin out as if it was a real one, and then seeing how far you could throw it. And I can remember going one day, nothing to do with being in the Army Cadets. Amongst the sand was one of these white hand grenades, but I knew it was safe.
Whilst many of Osborne Avenue's pupils and staff members contributed to efforts on the home front, others saw action in theatres of war around the globe.
Of course, war broke out then, so she was minus 3 boys that went into the war. Each one went in the army, one went in the RAF, the other went on the Merchant Navy ships. Just quite interesting. The one in the Merchant Navy, which was an important job then, because of all the food coming over, he got torpedoed off the coast of Africa, near Cape Town. Told us about all the fruit and all the goods all floating about on the water, and they had to swim to shore. Fortunately, he said it was only about a mile to shore, and when they got there, he was picked up by a couple who took him to their house and looked after him until he was able to get join another ship, and he did keep in touch with them after the war. One in the RAF was in Burma. When he came home, he had this big curved knife, and it was the only thing he mentioned about the war. And he said it saved his life because they were in the jungle and the Japanese were in trees, and one jumped out on him and he had to kill him with this knife. Because they never liked to talk much about the war, but he did mention that one. And the one in the army, he drove tanks in Egypt and Alexandria, and he was driving a tank and he got a bullet through the peak of his cap. So all 3 had near misses, if you could say that. But they all came back quite safely.
Family members waited in eager anticipation for news of their loved ones serving overseas.
Well, when they were away, I used to miss them because I was the only one left at home, and it seemed very quiet and very lonely without them. Of course, when you've got brothers, you feel safe, and if you go out and you feel safe, you've got a brother around that look after you. And Bill and Alan, they always used to look after me. So when they were out, when they were gone or missing, I used to wait for letters to come in, and sometimes they were a long time before they'd get round to writing. But it used to be exciting when we got a letter.
The D-Day invasion of Normandy marked the beginning of the end of the war. As Allied forces pushed towards Germany, former pupils of Oswin Avenue School were amongst their number, one being Basil Fleetwood, who survived head wounds during the Liberation Campaign. Whilst officially, the war for Britain ended with the surrender of Japan on the 15th of August 1945, the news that Germany's surrender had been accepted on the 8th of May was met with jubilation in Allied countries.
At the end of the war, I was still at Waverley School, and we had a very, very big street party. I've got a lovely photograph of all the people in the street, and I can name every one of them. It weren't just our street, there were one or two people that come from Woodstock Road and Kenilworth Road and places like that. But we had the biggest party. My mum made the cake for it. She iced it red, white and blue, but she couldn't get any blue colouring, so she used the dolly bag colour the icing. Didn't kill us because I'm still here. We all took his own knife, fork and spoon with a bit of string round, because everybody used the same colour string, so you still didn't know which way you had the end of it. But the celebration was unbelievable. It really was. And we got our first ice cream that we'd ever had. And it had great big chunks of ice in it. It were horrible, but it were ice cream.
And then after the war, we had a street party when they blocked the street off, and they had tables in the street, and we had food. And then we had a concert organised by Mrs. Patchin, who lived in the street. We were all dressed, all the lads were dressed as cowboys, singing Ragtime Cowboy Joe, and you had two pistols and you fired them in the air with cap guns.
A school party was held in celebration of the end of World War II, which I guess was at the end of the war in Europe. Small medals were given to children to mark the occasion.
I used to go with an aunt of mine to visit another aunt up in Whitley Bay. And when the war finished, I was staying at Whitley Bay with this auntie, and they announced it, and I'd already gone to bed. It was 11 o'clock at night, I think, and they came and woke me up, and they said, "Come on, we're going down. They've got a bonfire ready. They knew it was going to happen," and it was on Cullercoats Bay, and we went down, and we all went to this big bonfire, and I can remember us walking all arm in arm down Marsden Road. It was Marsden Road at Whitley Bay, singing Bladen Races.
And they all had street parties. There's quite a few photographs now of each street, because there were so many either side streets of us. Everybody baked or cooked something for the party, and we put streamers up from opposite houses. I don't know how they did it, but we had them from one bedroom window across to the other bedroom window.
For those in the Royal Navy, the celebrations would have to wait as dangerous operations continued.
The date was May the 8th, an ordinary day. We were on patrol. We weren't with a convoy this day, everything was peaceful. There was something in the air though on board ship. During the war there was no communication, we had no wireless or anything. But eventually the skipper spoke through the loudspeakers. Anybody who was not on watch, congregate in your mess deck. And at 3 o'clock we were patched up with the wireless, the BBC. Churchill was telling us peace had been declared. There was no overall excitement, it was just a feeling of relief. The danger had gone, we could soon be home with our loved ones. But that was soon dashed. The captain came on after the broadcast and said, "We're at peace, but we, as the Navy, we are still at war." Apparently Dönitz had ordered all his U-boats to surface, surrender to all the Allied forces. However, U-boats being submerged, communications was bad. and there was always possibilities of a maverick captain. We could have got torpedoed. So we cruised about a bit, and eventually one U-boat surfaced, and he was taken to Scapa Flow, and a prize crew of British sailors put on board. We were then ordered to go to Norway. To get there, we went there ostensibly to pick some U-boats up. Bergen was a main base for Hitler's latest U-boats, in the U-boat pens, and it was our job to go and get them. When we arrived there, we opened the deadlights of the ship, which was alongside, and all of a sudden they were filled with faces, and these turned out to be Russian prisoners of war. They were starving. The Germans had used those as labourers and everything, and when peace came they just deserted them. But so we finished up feeding food, and our baker had to make more bread and pass the food over to them. Eventually we took these U-boats and we escorted them back to Scapa Flow. They were fast U-boats. They were actually faster than our ships, and the German crews were still there. And we took them, they finished up in Scapa Flow. And then after we went on leave, and by that time all the excitement everybody sees in Trafalgar, that had all gone, and we sort of missed out on that. But eventually we found our way home, and it was nice just to walk home, get to Doncaster, and just to go back into the door. I was home. The war was over. Normality had come back, hopefully anyway.
In the months following the end of the war, teachers who had served in the forces returned to the classrooms. Some thrilled the pupils with tales of their wartime exploits.
And this was fine because there were mainly women teachers, middle-aged, should I say, or younger men, were still at war, just being demobbed, and they were gradually coming back into teaching. So one week you would be taught by a female teacher, and then the next thing they were replaced by a male teacher. Sometimes it was good, sometimes it wasn't so good.
One of the teachers at Oswin was Frank Scott. In the evenings he ran the youth club at Oswin Avenue as well, and he used to tell tales of his adventures during the war on a motor torpedo boat in the Mediterranean, and the things he got up to. He used to carry one or two of the top people, Churchill and people like that, Montgomery, to secret rendezvous. He used to know some of the lads who were on his ship to join the Navy with people who were now admirals, and so wherever they went, they used to go and see these admirals, and always came back with a suitcase full of rations.
Some chose not to relive the traumas of war with their pupils. Luorti had been captured by Japanese forces at the fall of Singapore. One family member described how he had suffered unimaginable torture, and yet he had never condemned those responsible.
And he was a lovely man. A lovely man. To my mind, even as a young lad then, from, being there as a 12-year-old and onwards, you could actually see, I believe, I always looked at his face and I always thought I could see the strain and the stress of what that man must have gone through. It seemed to me, my imagination, but it seemed it was etched in his face, what he'd gone through.
The experiences of those pupils who had lived through the trauma of war were to become part of the school curriculum for the generations that followed. In 1958, Oswin Avenue school English teacher, Miss Furness, read Paul Gallico's The Snow Goose to the girls of her class. Set against a backdrop of the horror of war, the novella proved inspirational to 13-year-old pupil Pamela Bell.
Over the radio, loud and clear, came out a voice for all to hear. Rowing boats, speedboats, big ships and all, go out at once to the Dunkirk wall. 700 soldiers lie in a bay, waiting and waiting forever and a day. The Germans behind them, the ocean before, this is your chance to help in the war. So that dark night, 100 ships went to fight for the lives of those 700 men. They sailed neath the moon till there was not room for another, not even a skiff. While down on the beach, not even a leech was untouched by enemy fire, and high, so much higher, a plane and a flyer zoomed down to a fierce attack. And then bang, smack, the plane found its target, a pleasure boat from Margaret. But the little boats all came in thunder and rain and picked up the men, every one, and now they are home and no more alone, those men from the Dunkirk war.
Amongst the troops evacuated from Dunkirk was former Oswin Avenue pupil Corporal Ronald Medley. He was one of 3 siblings who also were active service. His brother Lloyd served in the Royal Artillery, whilst his sister Elsie, also a former Oswin Avenue pupil, was a private in the Auxiliary Territorial Service. After the war, the Oswin Avenue Land Army Barrack was repurposed to suit the needs of the school. At one stage it served as an abode for Mr. G. Aorty, the school's caretaker. Known as the Annex, the building was used as a classroom where technical drawing, art and, quite fittingly, rural studies were taught. Over the years, the building's wartime heritage faded from memory. This is a pity, as a little more knowledge of the school's role during the war, specifically as a location for Home Guard training, may have helped alleviate a degree of anxiety during an incident which occurred in the 1960s.
Derek Woodburn had sent some boys into what was called the Orchard to do some work. I was teaching in the school at this time, and the boys were doing something in the orchard when they came across a bomb. It was a small bomb, about, let's say, 15 inches long, bulbous at one end, fins at the other end, and it looked like a bomb. And so they rushed off to tell Derek. Derek went it, found this thing, thought it looked particularly dodgy, and brought it back to the annex, carefully. Somebody by then had rung for the police because it was obviously considered to be a dangerous item. The police turned up. Everybody was standing around by this time, looking at this rather dangerous object from afar. And the caretaker came on and said, "Oh, we found that bomb again." The police went absolutely ballistic. "What do you mean again?" "Oh," he says, "it's been going around for years. They keep finding it and digging it up and finding it." Because none of us knew. None of the kids knew. So the police gave the caretaker a bit of a carpeting for being so jocular about something as serious as an exploded bomb. And it did turn out to have been a hoax. It was a bomb, but it had been defused and a rubber end was placed on it, which we didn't know. And occasionally people would bury it somewhere and leave it for maybe years, and then it would be dug up and cause such a sensation as that. Very strange. Only in Bowlby.
In the year 2021, the Ossie Through the Ages project was grateful to receive access to a series of documents and photographs pertaining to the late Cyril Holmes. From his school exercise books, we discovered that Cyril was an A-class pupil throughout his time in senior school. Through documentation, we learned that Cyril had a long-term association with the Scouting movement. Correspondence revealed him to be a sociable character who enjoyed a beer, had a love of jazz music, and close bonds with his family members. Amongst the collection of letters was one dated 25th of March 1943, informing Cyril's family that he was missing. Later they would receive news that Cyril had been captured by Japanese forces. Any hopes that Cyril would return home were dashed in October 1943. The War Office recorded how Cyril had died whilst a prisoner of war. Cyril's remains are buried in the Yokohama British Commonwealth War Cemetery. When, on the 8th of May, we raise a glass to celebrate the triumph over tyranny, let us remember the sacrifices made by so many to deliver that victory. If you would like to know more about the Ossie Through the Ages project, then please email me at tonyarmstrong1959@outlook.com. Thank you.